When you want to run large language models locally, it comes down to VRAM. How much VRAM do you have? More of it means you can fit bigger models, more context, more users at once. The expensive path is NVIDIA. This RTX Pro 4000 GPU is $2,500 and it gives you 24 gigs of VRAM. But if you want to go the cheaper route, you have GPUs from Intel, the B series. The B60 also has 24 gigs of VRAM, but it's $650. Now, if you wanted 48 gigabytes of VRAM, should you get two B60s or should you get one card with two GPUs on it? And also, is there a performance benefit to that? And yes, this one got a little different, so I had to call someone way smarter than me. My phone battery has basically become a two-part routine. I use it hard for half the day, then I find a charger to get through the rest of the day. And if you're bouncing between office, coffee shops, airports, or just a long day out, you know the feeling. This segment is sponsored by Baseus and their PicoGo series. The PicoGo Air is a light daily option, only 0.27 inches thick, with NFC smart battery monitoring through the Baseus app, and Baseus says it runs 18 degrees Fahrenheit cooler for close to skin comfort. For my routine, I'd grab the PicoGo AM52. I already carry a battery every day, but 10,000 milliamp hours gives me more breathing room, with a built-in cable and charging for up to 3 devices. Air for everyday carry, AM52 for longer days. Check compatibility, especially if you want to use that Qi 2.2 25-watt ultra-fast wireless charging, and hit the link in the description to check out the Baseus PicoGo series. This is something interesting. Excuse me. And the reason is because it's only one card and it's like two of these. So yeah, these are both B60s from Intel, and I did a whole episode on those. But this is a B60 Dual. Frankly, bag. What's really interesting about this is that it's the same size as one of these, and Maxon, they're the only manufacturer that's making these. These are the two GPUs, you can see them through the back. So I'm gonna test one against two to see what we can do. Did not mean for that to rhyme. And I'm also gonna do some tests against the B70s too. Put that against AMD and NVIDIA, and we have this picture. Intel sits right down here with the B60. They also got the B70 for about $1,000 with 32 gigs. And up here we've got 48 gigabytes for two B60s, or we got this Maxon, which is actually more expensive than buying two B60s. So why? Why would I get one of these? Oh, it's heavier. Now you're looking at the RTX Pro 5000, 48 gigs of memory, and we're at $6,000. If you want to get 96, you're over here with a Pro 6000, kind of in a class on its own. So Intel's pitch here is more VRAM per dollar, but cheap VRAM and useful VRAM are different things. So let's run some things. Inside this beast over here, I ended up running small models, medium models, and larger models. Not huge models. So inside this beast here, which is a fractal case and has got an Asus Pro board on it, Intel Xeon CPU. As usual, I like to start with my small Qwen 3 4 billion parameter model, and I know some of you will say, oh, that's just too small, and you're right. For some things, it is too small, including what we're trying to do here. But it's kind of a baseline. Here's one B70, generating tokens at 92 tokens per second. By the way, this is the FP8 version of that model, and Intel does have support for the FP8 on the hardware level. And the B70 beats running two B60s working together in tensor parallelism. Notice also that one B60 runs a little bit slower than two B60s. That's because we are using tensor parallelism, so there's fast communication and low latency between the two GPUs. But that's not always the case. It depends on the model. So for example, here, Qwen 3.5 27 billion, integer 4 quantization. It's a newer model, and we have slightly different architecture here. 28.3 tokens per second on the B70, and now two B60s actually beat it. One B60 can't run it at all because this model is larger. Even with 4-bit quantization, the model is almost 30 gigs in size, and then you also need a little bit of headroom, which this does not have. Finally, this oldie but a goodie, well, maybe not so great anymore, but I used to do this in my tests, so I included it here. It's a 30 billion parameter mixture of experts integer 4 quantization. B70, 45 tokens per second. B60, 44.5, very close there. And then two B60s go down in speed here. Now, I did a separate video on the B70s and the B60s and the B50 last year. So quick reality check on the software, because it kind of shapes these numbers. Intel's hardware is good. The software is still catching up to where NVIDIA is. NVIDIA is way further ahead in software, and that's what allows them to charge these kinds of prices. The software stack I'm running is LLM Scalar, and it's a fork of VLLM that's probably about a month behind where VLLM currently is. And the supported models are listed here in this GitHub repository, and you'll see that some of the newest models that are actually supported here probably a month or two old, which is fine. You're not going to be running the breakneck state-of-the-art stuff, but it's not going to be bleeding edge. Bleeding edge, breakneck, what is this thing? What? I'm not a violent channel. What's up with all these violent terms for latest and greatest? Let's call it latest and greatest, okay? That's better. However, you'll notice if you watch my video about the B70s from maybe a month and a half ago, the Qwen 3.5 wasn't even there yet. So they're definitely working on this all the time, making stuff happen, which is great. Progress being made. Finally, it was time to check the Max Sun card. I seeded the card, I plugged it in, powered on the machine, and nothing. Card was not detected. Tool says no device discovered, and the PCI list was empty. The card was plugged in, I swear. But the computer was saying the card doesn't exist. So this was my first time using a single card with 2 GPUs on it. And that has to be treated slightly differently because in this case, it's a switchless card, which means the GPUs can't talk directly to each other. They have to talk through the CPU. They have to talk through the PCI lane that they're connected to. Each one of them is kind of treated separately. So the motherboard itself is responsible for splitting that slot, that PCI slot, in half, one per GPU, and that's called bifurcation. And if the motherboard is not set up for it, the GPU is going to be pretty much invisible. So I couldn't fix that from the operating system. I needed to go to the BIOS. Luckily, a motherboard like this is dual Ethernet ports for connectivity into the OS and a separate Ethernet port for management, which means you can actually manage the computer as a server remotely. You don't even need to plug a monitor or a keyboard in here. So I can hop into the BIOS through remote connection from my Mac. Finally, I found the PCI settings, and slot 1 was where I put this card, and I was able to split that PCI card into 2. Rebooted, watched the screen, and it came up. There they are, both of them 2 B60s, full Gen 5, full bandwidth, 24 gigs each, and it's alive. Now, the question that came up in my mind immediately is, we now have 2 GPUs sharing one slot. Does that cost you anything versus 2 real cards that are side by side, each one of them having their own PCI slot? So here's Qwen 3.4B, and it's looking like the 2 B60s. All right, let's try the 27 billion parameter model. Okay, 26.7 tokens per second, average, 25.3, 26.6. And we're at prompt processing is 1789 tokens per second. Oh, up to 2100 tokens per second now, 2200 tokens per second. Now, I know I didn't talk about prompt processing. I'll cover that in another video, so make sure you don't miss that. But just wanted to mention it for this one. Overall, Max Sun, the dual GPU card against 2 B60s is pretty much identical. Sure, there's some margin for error, like in this case right here with 4B model, FP8. But pretty much every model squeezing into 2 GPUs on board, splitting one slot, costs you nothing. Same speed as 2 cards, 1 slot though. Now, tokens per second isn't everything. What else can you do with this? I ran LTX2, this is the video generation model in Comfy UI. This is a text to video pipeline, and I did specifically request Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, "I'll be back."
I'll be back.
This time, it goes the other way. The B70 wins. Of course, we know the B70 is gonna win versus 2 B60s or 1 dual B60 because video generation is compute bound. It's not memory bound. Raw horsepower, and the B70 has more horsepower than a B60. Also, by the way, LTX is bound to 1 GPU, so in both cases, it ran on only 1 B60 and only 1 B60 out of the dual card, which is something you can do. You can use those individually if you want to. You can even have different models running on each B60 if you wanted to. So in this case, all that VRAM that we had didn't really help much. LTX still runs, and LTX can run on smaller hardware. But you can see the difference in the time that it took to generate, and you can see that we're very close on 1 B60 versus the 1 GPU B60. I'm gonna confuse myself, and I'm sounding confusing. If I say B60, I mean one of these, and if I say the Max Sun, I'm gonna mean that. Okay, the dual. All right, we can see that the time it took to generate that video is pretty much exactly the same on both of those, which is 226.7 and 224.6 versus 167 seconds that it took to generate on the B70. But if it's a tie on speed, the decision comes down to what speed chart doesn't actually show, like power. Now, imagine for a second, you have to power 2 of these B60s or 1 of those Max Sun cards. Which one do you think is gonna take more power? Here we go. Same workload, and the Max Sun actually sips a little bit less power. About 129 watts versus 134 with the dual B60s. Oh my God, I said it again. With 2 B60 GPU cards. So it's pretty modest difference, but it's pretty consistent. You will be using just a little bit less power with 1 card. It may not even make that much of a difference for you. But here's the real reason you'd want to go with a Max Sun card and why you'd want to actually spend more on buying one of those than 2 B60s. Knowledge. No, that's wrong video. Density. Okay, that was a stupid joke. 2 GPUs in 1 slot means you can fill up a 4-slot machine like this one and get even more VRAM total. For example, recently I made a video with 4 B60 GPUs in this chassis on this motherboard, and because each one of these is a 2-unit GPU and that motherboard has 7 slots, you can only physically fit 4 of these in there, unless you do retimers and riser cables, and yeah, you can do that, but I mean, inside the box, let's set that as our limit. 4 of those will be 96 gigabytes of VRAM. 4 of these, which are pretty much the same size, these are also 2-space GPUs. 4 of these will give you 128 VRAM. The Max Sun, if you take 4 of those, it'll give you 192. So that's the argument. It's not about the speed, it's about fitting those workloads that the cheaper cards can't touch, and at a price nowhere near NVIDIA's. $1,750 for this Max Sun card times 4, $7,000 for 192 gigabytes of VRAM of GPU power. $7,000 versus $24,000 if I were to use NVIDIA RTX Pro 5000s for the same amount of VRAM. Now, NVIDIA, of course, as I've said before, has their CUDA stack, and they have GDDR7, which is the newer generation of memory. So yeah, it's going to be faster. They also have different memory bandwidths. NVIDIA is much faster in memory bandwidth, so it's going to be faster in token generation. And I've actually done the comparisons to these cards before in the previous videos. You can go check those out. I'll link them down below. But I only have one of these, and I've had to bifurcate that PCI slot. And consumer motherboards, not all of them will support bifurcation, so you have to be careful. Just a warning for you. And I don't know if even in this Pro motherboard, if every single lane will bifurcate and I can put 4 of these in there. So that's what I'm gonna call an expert. Hi, Wendell, the famous office.
You just need to buy a giant house with a workshop.
Yes, yes. And I need to make a lot more money to buy the giant house in Washington, D.C. Oh, that's Wendell from Level 1 Techs. And I called him because he has the exact same machine in a video not too long ago. But did you have this inside one of them?
No, I do not have any Max Sun anything.
Those are pretty cool. So my question to you, we have this motherboard. We have 7 slots in there, but when you have 2 slot cards in there, you can put 4. Do you think this board will support that?
It'd be easy to test because you can take a 1 card and just move it.
I could do that, but I think asking a Wendell would be way easier than me doing that and rebooting this thing multiple times.
I think you still got all the lanes, so double check the manual, and the manual will tell you for sure. But bifurcating a slot, even down to like X4, 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 generally pretty supported on all boards these days.
Well, that's good to know. And it depends on the CPU too, right?
The only thing that's been squirrely on those Intel Xeons has been IOMMU separation, because sometimes the IOMMU Group 1 to IOMMU Group 2, you don't get the full bandwidth. But Xeon 6, I think they've solved a lot of those issues.
Nice. All right, Wendell, take care. Thank you.
Take care.
See ya. As a side note, Wendell told me about something really cool that I can't talk about yet, but he'll have on his channel pretty soon. So make sure you subscribe to Level 1 Tech's channel so you don't miss it. I'll leave a link to it down below. So if I were you, mostly chatting small models, one strong card like a B70 is simpler and snappier. You can put this into any motherboard pretty much. You don't need a Pro motherboard. But if you need 27 billion parameters and up, big context, lots of users on a budget, then you might need to double up on a B70 or double up on a B60. Or if you have limited space, the Maxon card. This dual one card system is a smart way to get there, if your board can do it. That's pretty much the whole point of this card. And credit to Maxon. 2 GPUs on one board, one slot, and 0 penalty. That's really clever. And at the price that nobody's doing it. But let me dream for a second. Now, can you do it with a dual B70? Each B70 is 32 gigs. So a dual B70, 64 gigs on one board, then fill 4 slots, and that's 256 gigs of VRAM, 8 GPUs in one machine, still nowhere near NVIDIA pricing. Maxon, if you're listening, build that one. I want to see it. So, 2 cheap cards or 1 dual card? Which one would you buy? Let me know in the comments down below. I read all your comments. Watch the B60 video over here and the B70 video over here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.